Hi, welcome back to our series on human resource management. Today we're talking about employee safety. I know that doesn't sound like a terribly sexy topic, but actually this is very, very important. Not just because you want to go home to your friends and family and life intact, but because it's really important to the organization for a whole variety of reasons. And so with that, let's talk about that. Okay, so let's get into employee safety. Now, when companies say that they care about your safety, they really do, but maybe not for the reasons that they say. So they're going to say that they really care about you as a person and your health and your safety, and they want you to go home to your family and provide for your family and take care of your kids and live a healthy, happy life and go off and go mountain biking and all that sort of stuff. And who knows, maybe they do. But let me tell you why employers really care about safety. First of all, greater productivity due to fewer lost work days from absenteeism is a result of good safety policy, as well as greater efficiency and loyalty from workers who are more involved with their job and feel like they're working in a safe environment. There's reduced medical and insurance costs, lower workers' compensation rates for the employers, and direct payments due to fewer claims. And then better selection ratios because of the increased attractiveness of the organization as a good, solid, safe place to work. So what this essentially means is unsafe work conditions and injury and absenteeism and so forth is extremely expensive for employers. It is a stupid, stupid thing to end up having to pay for. There's a lot of things that employers have to pay. You have to pay taxes. You have to pay wages. You have to, pay facilities. You have to pay, you have to market, yada, yada, yada. But you don't have to pay for really stupid decisions around safety. And if you're going to have your bottom line hit, you don't want it hit by something like this. And so that is why employers really truly do care about safety. They also might care about safety because they like you. I'm not going to say they don't, just saying it's a bottom line thing. Okay, so what causes safety issues that keep employers up at night? Well, you're talking about blood-borne illnesses, repetitive motion things like, cumulative trauma disorders, sound levels, chemicals, machinery, the nature of the work itself, like construction, ergonomics, the proper design of work environment to address the physical demands of experienced knowledge workers. So yes, there's even safety concerns for those rug rats or cubicle dwellers that work at computers all day long. So when employers are concerned about safety, they're concerned on many levels. Okay, now we can't talk about safety without talking about the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, or OSHA. OSHA outlines the employer responsibilities and rights as follows. Each employer is required to furnish each of their employees a place of employment that is free from recognized hazards that could cause or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm. Employees are required to comply with the occupational health and safety standards and all their rules, regulations, and orders issued as a result of anything that they find on site. And only employers, and this is something that employers care about from a bottom line perspective, only employers can be cited and fined for OSHA violations. Employees can't be cited. So that's why they can kind of get all in a tizzy when employees are violating safety regulations, because it's not the employee who's going to get fined, it's the employer. Okay, so OSHA regulations. Employer is required to record occupational deaths, injuries, and illnesses. According to OSHA, by the way, a recordable case is one in which there was an injury or death. And they're also required to provide employees with information about hazardous substances and safety policies in the workplace. Now, an employee can refuse to work if they believe that there's an immediate risk of injury or death, and the employer can't retaliate, or at least this is according to OSHA regulation. Furthermore, OSHA conducts workplace inspections, responds to grievances and complaints, and can issue citation and penalties for failure to comply with these standards. So once again, employers really do get kind of anxious when they are concerned that safety regulations are not being followed. Okay, so that's OSHA. Next, I want to talk about sexual harassment. We did discuss sexual harassment at a very light level when we went over legal, but now I want to revisit it and focus on it as a workplace safety issue. First, by way of reminder, there are two types of sexual harassment. We have the quid pro quo. It's meaning this for that, when an employee is forced to choose between sexual advances or forfeiting career opportunities. We also have hostile work environment, an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment that unreasonably interferes with an employee's work or performance. Now, in what way is an employer liable from a safety standpoint for sexual harassment? Well, many. Unwelcome conduct or communication of a sexual nature is considered harassment, and the employer is liable for this. Harassment based on a person's gender, harassment that affected a term or condition or privilege of a person's employment. In all these cases, the employer is legally responsible for the harassment. So what do employers need to do in order to make sure that they are covered both legally and from a safety standpoint when it comes to sexual harassment? Well, first, they have to have a sexual harassment policy on file. Now, it's not enough to just put this policy together and throw it in a drawer somewhere. They then have to provide communication and training to employees regarding this policy. So odds are you in the workplace have had to go through some level of sexual harassment training. That is a result of this sort of employer response requirement. Finally, employers are required to investigate and take action whenever a sexual harassment complaint is brought to their attention. Now, the result of that investigation and the type of action I can't really speak to, but the point is, in order for them to be able to profess that they have a safe work environment, they have to have a really good record when it comes to investigation and action. Now, another area of safety that we're concerned with is workplace violence. Workplace violence, obviously, is a very deep and complicated issue, one that we are still struggling with. However, there are things that employers and HR organizations can do to help mitigate the risk. The first is careful hiring practices. You've got to screen applicants for past violent behaviors through the background checks. That's one of the reasons we run those. You also need to take the risk of workplace violence into account when delivering performance appraisals. I mean, let's face it, sometimes during a performance appraisal, anxiety and tension and emotions can get high, and this could potentially add to the risk of workplace violence. So to mitigate for this, a few things you can do is make sure that you focus on the behavior and the future improvement rather than on the personality. Never discipline employees in front of others. There are many other things that you can do. The point is, you need to understand when and where workplace violence or the potential for workplace violence is heightened. And in all cases, organizations should have employee assistance programs, EAPs. This is basically a benefit offered to employees in which they can access a therapist or a counselor should they have issues that they need to talk about and resolve. These are very good programs. They've been proven to be effective, and so this is something that every employer should offer to their employees. And then, of course, from an employer standpoint, we do not tolerate bullying or harassment in the workplace of any sort. This means we need to train employees to recognize the warning signs of bullying and harassment so that we can create a safe work environment and document procedures for dealing with these type of events. Okay, so we've got all these safety policies and practices and requirements, laws, rules, and regulations, but there are challenges to implementing these safety policies. Let's talk about some of these. The first is we really need to make sure they're realistic and sustainable. In some environments, these safety regulations can almost feel a little bit ridiculous, and you don't want that. You want to make sure that you have programs that are feasible, acceptable, implementable, and reasonable, not seen as a joke or a waste of time to employees. I'll give you an example. One time I worked for Intel and somebody wrote me up for walking across the parking lot, not in the designated walking areas, but just walking in the parking lot. Well, to me, that's pretty unreasonable. Let's face it, our whole lives we walk through parking lots and we're not constantly following this designated path of which direction we should go to get to what entrance. But that's just me kind of venting for a moment. We also need top-level support. We need to make sure that every level of management is involved in these safety programs and practice what they preach and lead by example and attitude. If they exhibit a sort of flippant, laissez-faire attitude towards safety, then the employees will as well. So the top management at every level needs to walk the walk. And by doing this, we will create a good, solid, safe work environment, one in which we can focus on the job, enjoy what we do, go home at the end of the day, safe and secure, and as a nice benefit, save the company some money so they can invest it in things that matter. Okay, so there we are, employee safety. As you can see, there's a lot for organizations to kind of take into account as they figure out how to best create a safe, thriving work environment for their employees. All right, more to go over. Hang in there, folks, and we'll talk to you later.